Chinese farming. The Chinese peasantry entered the modern age in the autumn of 1979. The rusticated youth were being allowed back to the cities. The Cultural Revolution was being condemned as a disastrous error. And a fundamental economic reform dismantled the huge collectivized communes. China has half as much cultivated land as America, but 4 times as many mouths to feed. Deng was desperate to raise yields. The Chinese press reported, "Facts have proved that it amounts to sheer illusion to suppose that socialism can be built by deliberately preventing people from getting rich." A television. Mr. Jiang and his family live in luxury unimaginable 10 years ago. It would have horrified Jiang Qing. In 1981, the nation was riveted by television coverage of the dying chapter of the Cultural Revolution. The Gang of Four stood accused of their crimes in a great show trial. Jiang Qing put up the spirited defense that everything she had done had been at Chairman Mao's orders. Jiang Chunqiao refused to answer questions before a panel of judges which included many of his victims. The literary critic Yao Wenyuan did confess to the accusations, for instance, that the gang had persecuted to death 34,800 people, and so did the former young heartthrob Wong Hung-won. The court heard devastating testimony from the victims of the Cultural Revolution. Fei Xiaotung was one of the judges as the nation mourned the lost years.
We felt that during those 10 years of the Cultural Revolution, the people of the whole nation, the Chinese people, had suffered a great loss. Many died. So at the time of the trial, our aim was to clarify what was right and what was wrong. We all felt a great sense of consolation. We proved that we had stood on the side of the truth all our lives. That was very important. I was present throughout the trial of Jiang Qing and the followers of the Gang of Four. There were over a dozen of us. I was one of the judges. We investigated everything they said and did. From this, we could see that they had indeed committed crimes. So we passed sentence on them. Jiang Qing was sentenced to death, a suspended sentence. It wasn't carried out at the time. She has, of course, since committed suicide.
Long
live the revolution, she shouted as she was led away. Judged by those like Professor Fei, who had been their victims, the Gang of Four disappeared into the history books. China began to look very different. The party declared that large-scale, turbulent class struggle of a mass character had, in the main, come to an end. In Guangzhou, Avon lady, Liang Yongjun, put away the blue cotton suits of her revolutionary youth.
When I was younger, I really wanted to be different and express my individuality. Clothes, for example. We all wore very simple clothes, but I used to embroider patterns on mine. And my hair, in those days we all had our hair in plaits. The other girls normally kept their plaits behind their ears, but I used to comb mine further back and bring it round to the front and tie a butterfly bow at the bottom. When you beautify yourself, you also beautify your environment, especially now in our country with the open door policy and the higher standard of living. people's material conditions are improving accordingly. By making ourselves beautiful, we raise our efficiency at work. And also, we can create greater harmony in the home, because every husband, every child likes to have their wife or mother to be more beautiful, more attractive.
In China, at that time of economic reform, the head ruled the heart. Deng said, "If they tell you you're a capitalist roader, it means you're doing a good job." And so in 1981, this toy factory became the first in China to try a daring experiment. The man on the left is Chinese factory manager Danny Chen. The man on the right is Hong Kong entrepreneur. Capitalist investment and communist labor combining to make export profits in the special economic zone of Shenzhen.
At the time, no one else was doing it. So if you wanted to do it, you had to have courage. That's the first thing. We had many favorable conditions in setting up our factory in Shenzhen. The main ones were that, first, labor in Shenzhen was cheaper than in Hong Kong. That was the first thing. Secondly, rent and other costs were cheaper than in Hong Kong. Moreover, Shenzhen has a bigger labor force. If I need more workers, I can get them easily. This wouldn't be the case in Hong Kong, where labor's in short supply. When we first arrived in Shenzhen, I remember it was a very small village. All the buildings were very old, and there were hardly any of them.
They've built Shenzhen in 10 years to a city of 2 million people. It's rich, but troubled with crime, prostitution, and black marketeering. Deng said, "When you open the door, some flies get in." By 1984, its open door to the British colony had taken Shenzhen's exports to $260 million. In September that year, the British Prime Minister signed the agreement by which Hong Kong reverts to Chinese rule in 1997. The barbarians from the Western Ocean in retreat at last. As a Mandarin told his emperor in 1843, "With this type of people from outside the bounds of civilization, one has to be diplomatic in the essential business of subduing and conciliating them." Within a week of his Hong Kong triumph, Deng Xiaoping took the salute at the celebrations to mark 35 years of communist rule in China. An admirer congratulated him for putting heaven and earth in order, opening the doors, establishing order, discipline, and great democracy. But Deng was no democrat in any Western sense. China would be certain to fall to pieces and be incapable of achieving anything without the leadership of the Communist Party, he said. So, not all Western ideas were welcomed through the open door. Guangzhou was the first Chinese city ever opened to Western trade. The influence can still be seen in the fine old European buildings of the Shamian area. Here, the early traders were confined by law, forbidden even to learn the Chinese language. China was always afraid Western ideas might be catching, afraid of the effect of spiritual pollution on its future. This is the Guangzhou No. 2 Vocational School of Tourism. Liang Guirong's class will grow up to work with foreigners. To protect them, she teaches the life of a communist hero, the simple soldier Lei Feng. He led a blameless life of service to the people and described himself humbly as a screw that never rusts and will glitter anywhere I'm placed. The slogan, "Learn from Lei Feng," was first promoted in 1963.
This movement to open up and reform is especially great in Guangzhou because it's an open city. Once we open up, we start importing new technology and new equipment from abroad. At the same time, we let in all sorts of bad influences. All sorts of ideas and ways of thinking start flooding in from all sides. So we must try to distinguish which elements are good and worthy of learning and which are bad, to be resisted and rejected. Now that we're opening up, we must discriminate between these things and decide what's right and what's wrong. In Guangzhou, therefore, more than anywhere else in the country, I think it's important to learn from Lei Feng.
It's not at all certain that Lei Feng ever really existed. Probably he was dreamt up by army propagandists. But it's no accident that he was brought back into fashion as the student democracy movement began in 1986. Confucius said, "He who rules by moral force is like the pole star, which remains in its place while all the lesser stars do homage to it." The city of Guangzhou, the nation of China, still torn between wisdom and power, ancient and modern, east and west. Still seeking to fulfill the prophecy made by the young Mao Zedong in the year 1919. One day, the reform of the Chinese people will be more profound than that of any other people. We must all exert ourselves. We must all advance with the utmost strength. Our golden age, our age of glory and splendor, lies before us.